My name is Emily Hart. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life trying not to feel too much. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a flower shop in Portland, Oregon. It smells faintly of lilies year-round, which I like in theory more than in practice. The apartment is quiet, clean, and empty. That's the way I like it. Or maybe that's just how I've learned to cope. I wake up every day at 6:15 a.m. without an alarm. I pour the same bland cereal into the same chipped white bowl, take exactly 3 sips of coffee, and leave for work. I'm an accountant at a small firm downtown, the kind of job where no one asks personal questions and silence isn't awkward, it's expected. Numbers don't lie, they don't get emotional, and they don't betray you. I trust numbers. People, not so much. When I get home, I microwave dinner, usually something frozen, lasagna, maybe a sad turkey dinner with plastic peas. I sit on the couch with the TV on, sound low, not watching. The noise is just enough to keep my thoughts from echoing. I scroll on my phone, then toss it aside. I'm not close to anyone, not really. I answer texts when I feel like it, usually hours or days later. Most people stopped texting a long time ago. It's not that I don't feel lonely. I do. It's just that feeling anything is exhausting. Sometimes when I lie awake at night, I wonder how I got here. When did the silence become safer than connection? When did I stop needing people, or at least convincing myself that I didn't? I think I know when it started, but I've buried it so deep I can barely remember the shape of it. All I know is this. I've spent most of my life trying not to take up too much space, trying not to ask for anything, especially not love. Until last Tuesday. That was the day everything I thought I had successfully buried, all the grief, the guilt, the questions, came crashing back in a single voicemail. I was in the middle of balancing a budget report when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. But I didn't. I played the message on speaker, half distracted. A woman's voice, calm and measured. Emily, this is Aunt Rose. I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, honey, but your father passed away this morning. It was sudden. A stroke, they think. Vanessa's making the arrangements. I thought you should know. Click. That was it. No dramatic pause. No warm condolences. No invitation to talk. Just, he's gone. And just like that, the silence I had so carefully built around me cracked. When the message ended, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. I just stared at my desk, at the blinking cursor on the spreadsheet, as if that blinking line held some kind of answer. My father was dead. The words felt foreign in my mind. Not wrong, just distant, like hearing about someone else's loss. Someone else's father. I sat there for another 30 minutes, pretending to work, until I realized I hadn't entered a single number. My hands were trembling, just slightly. My heart was beating, but not in that panicked, devastated way you'd expect when someone important dies. It was hollow, like the echo of a memory you're not sure you really lived. The thing is, I hadn't seen my father in 7 years. Not since I walked out of that house and decided I was done. Done with the games, the silence, the favoritism. Done with pretending like it didn't matter. Back then, I didn't tell anyone goodbye. Not even him. I remember standing in the driveway, holding one suitcase and a folder of resumes. He came out to the porch, his face pale from a recent illness, wearing those ridiculous plaid slippers he never replaced. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. He just raised a hand, like a half wave, half warning, and I got in the car. That was it. Now he was gone. I left the office early that day, told my boss I wasn't feeling well. He didn't ask questions. I love that about him. I got home and stood in my kitchen for what felt like hours, staring at the voicemail transcript on my phone screen. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. I kept hearing her voice. Vanessa's making the arrangements. Of course she was. Vanessa, my older sister, the golden child, the one who stayed, who pleased, who knew how to navigate Mum and Dad's moods like a professional diplomat. I hadn't spoken to Vanessa in over 5 years. The last time we were in the same room, she called me a problem in search of attention. I think I called her a parasite. It wasn't one of our finer moments. Now she was handling everything: the funeral, the estate, the messaging to family. I hadn't even gotten a direct call from her. Just Aunt Rose, being practical. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the floor in front of the couch, like I used to do in college when everything felt too heavy for chairs. Do I go back? The question looped in my mind like a broken song. I didn't want to. I didn't want the fake hugs or the guilt-laced glances or the cold war with my mother that never officially ended. I didn't want the passive-aggressive jabs about how long I've been gone or what I've done with my life. But not going felt worse. He was still my father. He wasn't perfect. Far from it. But he was the only person in that house who ever made me feel seen, even if only in small fractured moments. I pulled my old duffel bag out of the closet and started folding clothes like a robot. Jeans, sweaters, black dress, the kind of clothes that said, "I'm mourning, but please don't talk to me." By midnight, I had a train ticket booked for the next morning. One way, just in case. I slept for maybe an hour, tangled in dreams that didn't make sense. Flashes of the front porch, the smell of his cologne, my hand as a little girl trying to fit inside his palm. When I woke, the silence felt heavier than usual. The train ride was long and slow, winding past trees that had lost their leaves and houses that looked too small to hold anything like grief. I watched the scenery blur, my reflection faint in the window, overlapping forests with tired eyes and dry skin. I looked like someone else, someone older. When the train finally pulled into the station just outside my hometown, I hesitated getting off. My bag sat by my feet like it belonged to a stranger. For a brief moment, I thought about staying on, riding the train to the next stop, disappearing again. Maybe no one would notice, but I stood up. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. The sky was that pale grey I remembered from so many winters in that town, a kind of colourless dome that made you forget the sun ever existed. Vanessa was supposed to pick me up. I didn't ask her to. She just texted me 2 words the night before, 6:20. Station. No greeting, no name, no "I'm sorry." The car was waiting when I stepped outside the station, our dad's old SUV. I blinked. For a second, I thought maybe he'd be behind the wheel, but it was her. Vanessa stepped out, all polished and perfect, a cream-colored coat, flawless curls, even her shoes matched. I hated that I noticed. "Emily," she said, like she was reading a line in a play. "Vanessa." She opened the trunk. I threw my bag in and slid into the passenger seat. We didn't hug. The drive was silent, except for the low hum of classical music on the radio. Her station, not mine. I stared straight ahead, but I could feel her eyes glance over every now and then, like she was waiting for me to crack first. The house hadn't changed. Not in the way most people mean. Sure, the paint was a little more chipped, and the mailbox leaned like it was tired of standing. But the house itself, that looming 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, was the same. And yet, it didn't feel like mine anymore. As we pulled up, I saw my mother through the window, standing in the kitchen. She didn't move when we arrived, just turned away. Inside, the air smelled like floor polish and wilted roses. I hated that smell. It reminded me of every holiday I spent trying not to cry at the dinner table. Mum met me in the hallway, arms folded, mouth thin. "You're thinner than I expected," she said instead of hello. "You look, well," I lied. She turned and walked toward the living room without another word. Vanessa followed like a shadow. I stayed behind, staring up the staircase. My old bedroom was at the end of the hall, last door on the right. I wondered if they'd changed it, if it still had the stickers on the inside of the closet door I hid when I was 12. The living room was filled with white lilies and sympathy cards arranged like trophies. I sat on the edge of the couch, stiff as a guest. Vanessa poured tea. Mum sipped hers like a ritual. I said nothing. "We're doing the memorial at St. Margaret's," Vanessa finally said. "Saturday, just a short service. Close family only." I nodded. "And the will is being read Sunday," she added casually, like announcing a dentist appointment. My stomach flipped, but I kept my face still. I didn't care about the money. I told myself that over and over again, but something about the way she said it, so practiced, so sure, made my throat tighten. "I'll be here," I said quietly. Vanessa looked at me for a second too long. Then she smiled. That small, tight smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm sure he'd be glad you came." It sounded like a lie, even from her. My childhood bedroom felt smaller than I remembered. The walls had been repainted in some generic beige, and all the posters, the glow-in-the-dark stars, the books I once loved, gone. The bed was the same frame, but a different mattress. Too firm, too clean. It didn't smell like me anymore. It smelled like stale lavender and mothballs. There was one bookshelf still standing in the corner. The bottom shelf sagged a little in the middle. I remembered that. My father had promised to fix it and never did. I used to tease him about it, and he'd laugh, ruffle my hair and say, "It has character, Em." I ran my fingers along the edge of it now and felt a wave of nausea. In the top drawer of the nightstand, I found nothing but a Bible and an old broken pen. In the closet, no boxes, no dusty journals, no stuffed animals, just hangers, empty ones. They had cleared me out, as if I'd never lived there at all. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Something inside me tightened, like grief, but quieter, more familiar, like dismissal, that old wound that said, "You were always temporary." I remembered a moment. I must have been 10 or 11 when I got sick and had to miss school for a week. I spent that week in this very bed, feverish, clutching a stuffed tiger named Milo. My mum came in once a day, just long enough to hand me soup and check my forehead. My dad, though, he came in after work each night, sat by my bed, and read aloud from books he picked just for me. One night I told him, "I think Mum's mad I'm sick." He smiled sadly and said, "She just doesn't know how to handle worry, sweetheart. Some people get loud, others get quiet." What do you do, eh? I try to show up. That sentence had lived in me for years. I try to show up. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he showed up for me in ways that felt like tiny rebellions against the house we lived in. Now he was gone, and the house had erased me. Dinner that night was just the three of us, Mom, Vanessa, and me, around the table like actors pretending to be a family. The dishes were fancy, like we were entertaining guests, but the conversation was lifeless. Vanessa made the green beans, Mom offered, from scratch. "They're good," I said. I hadn't tasted them. Mom glanced at my plate. "You barely touched your food." "I'm not very hungry." She gave a long, disappointed sigh, the kind she'd perfected over the years. A sigh that said, "Of course you're being difficult." Vanessa stepped in with a smile. "It's probably the travel. I'm sure she's just tired." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "Yes, that's it." They continued talking about logistics for the memorial, who would speak, whether Father Thomas still had the robes that fit. I said nothing. After dinner, I went upstairs. I sat in the dark for over an hour before getting up and opening the closet again. I don't know what I was looking for. Something that proved I had been loved here. Something that said I had once mattered. At the very back, tucked in the corner, I found an old shoebox. It was dusty, nearly falling apart, but when I opened it, I gasped. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them. Some of me as a baby, some with Dad on fishing trips, one where we were carving pumpkins and he'd drawn a mustache on mine. He looked so young, so alive. And then, buried beneath those, a photo I had never seen before. Me at about 16, sitting cross-legged on the front steps, crying. My father kneeling beside me, one arm around my shoulders. The photo was slightly blurry, like it had been taken from a distance or by accident. But the emotion was clear. He had held me like I was the only thing that mattered. I held the photo to my chest and cried for the first time in years. The church smelled like polished wood and fading flowers. It was the same one I grew up attending, St. Margaret's, with its narrow pews and stained glass saints watching over like indifferent witnesses. I hadn't stepped foot in it since I was 17. Back then, I faked stomach aches to skip Sunday services. Now I would have done anything for another excuse not to be here. The memorial was efficient, like a scheduled formality. Father Thomas gave a predictable eulogy, referencing my father's generosity, his faith, his role as a family man. There was no mention of imperfection, no nuance, no softness that resembled the man I knew. Vanessa spoke next. She stood tall at the podium, hair in a perfect chignon, voice clear and composed. Dad was my hero, she said. He taught me discipline. He taught me what it means to carry a legacy. Legacy. That word hit me like a slap. She didn't cry. She didn't have to. Her voice carried the weight of inheritance. I didn't speak. I hadn't been asked to. I wasn't even sure if I was allowed. After the service, people came to shake our hands. Most of them gave me that same sympathetic head tilt, the one people use when they don't remember your name but know they're supposed to feel something. You look just like your father, one older man said. Vanessa jumped in before I could respond. Everyone says that, she smiled. But I think she has Mom's attitude. I smiled politely. Inside, I felt like glass. Thin, transparent, ready to shatter. Back at the house, the lawyer arrived just before sunset. We gathered in the living room again, now stripped of flowers and visitors. The air felt thick. My mother sat in her usual chair like a queen at court. Vanessa stood behind her, arms crossed, as if she were bracing herself for the crown. The lawyer, Mr. Callahan, cleared his throat. I'll begin with a brief preamble your father dictated before his final will. Dictated, not handwritten. He expressed that he wanted this to be handled with dignity and peace. He hoped his daughters would support each other in honoring his wishes. I looked at Vanessa. Her expression was unreadable. Mr. Callahan continued, To my beloved daughter Vanessa Hart, I leave the family home and all assets therein, including the lake property and financial accounts under Hart Holdings. I blinked. Did I mishear? To my daughter Emily Hart, I leave. He paused. A collection of personal items to be distributed separately. That was it. I felt the room tilt, like gravity had turned sideways. My mother didn't flinch. Vanessa just folded her arms tighter. No one looked at me. Personal items? I was silent, frozen. Mr. Callahan shuffled the papers and offered a gentle, professional nod, as if he had just handed out equal gifts. I rose to my feet slowly. What personal items? I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. He looked up, startled. There's a box in the attic labeled for you. He requested it not be opened until after the reading. I nodded numbly. Then I turned to my mother. Did you know? I asked. Her eyes met mine, cold, sharp, unbothered. Your father made his choices, she said, and I suggest you respect them. I opened my mouth to argue, but there was nothing left to say. I walked out, past the lawyer, past Vanessa, down the hall and up the stairs. In the attic, covered in dust and half hidden behind a stack of old Christmas decorations, was a box. It had my name on it. Just that. Emily. I carried it downstairs into the backyard, away from the others. I sat in the grass and opened it. Inside were photos, letters, a notebook, a pressed flower from a trip we took when I was 9. The ticket stub from a school play he came to, the only one he ever attended. A drawing I made of him when I was 5. He'd kept it all this time. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope. To Emily. My true legacy. My hands shook as I held it, and that's when I broke. Because I realized something devastatingly clear. He hadn't forgotten me. He just didn't protect me. In the last episode, we met Emily, a quiet, observant woman trying to rebuild her life after her father's passing. But what seemed like a peaceful return to her childhood lake house turned into something else entirely. When she discovered the will had been changed, and her name was missing. Now, in episode 2, the surface cracks widen as old wounds resurface and long-buried truths begin to claw their way out. I stayed up all night. The box my father left me was still open on the floor, its contents spread out like puzzle pieces. It didn't make sense. The memories, the objects, the letters, all of it felt intentional, like a breadcrumb trail left not just for comfort, but for something more. A message, a warning. I picked up the letter I'd read the night before, the one in the sealed envelope marked, "To Emily, my true legacy." I read it again, slower this time. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wanted to say more before I left, but I wasn't sure I'd get the chance. I hope this box finds you, and that it finds you whole. But if not, maybe it helps you understand why I made some of the choices I did, and why I regretted others. There are things I wish I could change, Em. So many. Especially the distance that grew between us. It wasn't what I wanted. But sometimes, a man gets tired. Sometimes people around him push hard enough and he gives in. Doesn't mean he stops caring. Just means he runs out of fight. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong to this family. You do. You always did. There are papers, notes, lists, things I started to change, things I wanted to set right. I don't know if I finished in time, but maybe you'll find what I couldn't say out loud. I read that last paragraph 5 times. Things I wanted to set right. I don't know if I finished in time. Finished what? I pulled the box closer and sifted through it again. Tucked beneath the faded pressed flower and the school play ticket was a folded yellow notepad sheet, half ripped, scribbled in thick pen. It looked like a draft. A half-written list with bullets that trailed off. Revise trust. Name Emily indeed. Call Callahan. Too slow talk to V. No longer viable? Below that, in shakier writing, almost illegible. If anything happens, she'll take it all. My chest tightened. She'll take it all. Did he mean Vanessa? I grabbed the notebook next. Leather-bound, with his initials on the front in gold. I remembered it vaguely. He used to keep it in his study, always writing notes I wasn't allowed to read. I opened it slowly, afraid it would crumble from age. But the pages were clean, neat, numbered. Entries were dated sporadically, some from 3 years ago, others as recent as a few weeks before his death. Most were boring. Grocery reminders, half-thoughts about stocks. But then, around halfway through, I found this. Vanessa thinks I don't know what she's doing, but I'm not as senile as she thinks. She's moved accounts, convinced Callahan to streamline the estate. I shouldn't have trusted her with access. I have to undo it. I sat back, stunned. Undo it? Move accounts? What exactly had she done? In another entry, dated just 1 week before he died, I've rewritten the will. It's in the desk drawer, locked. Left instructions for R in case I can't deliver it myself. R, that had to be Aunt Rose. My pulse sped up. There was a newer will. He said it right there in his own handwriting. But it wasn't the one that got read. The one we heard, the one that gave everything to Vanessa, had been typed, notarized, filed by Callahan. There was no mention of a revision. And if Aunt Rose had it, why didn't she say anything? Unless we didn't know. She didn't know. Or worse, someone got to it before she could. I checked the box again. Nothing else. No key. No locked drawer. Just those words, that sentence circling in my brain. If anything happens, she'll take it all. I looked up at the ceiling. The attic hatch stared back, like a quiet witness. I grabbed the stepladder from the hallway closet. The attic hadn't changed in decades. It still smelled like cedar and mildew, still creaked under every step. Cobwebs hung from the beams like old memories. The light bulb flickered once before settling into a dull yellow glow. I moved slowly, scanning the clutter, plastic bins, dusty trunks, old seasonal decor. Near the back wall, beneath a canvas dropcloth, I found a stack of cardboard boxes labeled in black marker. One said, "Office turns. Dad's." I pulled it toward me and opened it. Inside, files, old mail, ledgers, receipts. Years of financial documentation. I searched every folder, fingers trembling. Then I saw it. A manila envelope, marked copy, last revision, 6/11. My heart stopped. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten will, signed, witnessed, dated June 11th, just 6 weeks before his death. It was brief, but clear. I leave equal shares of my estate to both my daughters, Emily and Vanessa Hart. I ask that my wife, Marie, be given residence rights in the family home for the duration of her life, but ownership passes equally to both daughters. I no longer retain confidence in a sole heir structure. I believe balance is the only way forward. My breath caught. This will change everything. And no one had said a word. The next morning, I woke with the envelope still in my hands and the attic dust still clinging to my skin. I didn't sleep. Not really. I just lay there, turning over every word of the handwritten will in my mind, trying to understand how something so important had been ignored or hidden. There was no doubt about it now. The official will, the one Mr. Callahan read aloud in that too-quiet room, wasn't the final one. Someone had made sure it never saw daylight. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that Callahan had never seen the handwritten version, that he hadn't known, but the gnawing weight in my stomach said otherwise. I needed to talk to someone who might know the truth, or at least someone who'd seen things I hadn't. So I walked down the hill to the gardener's cottage at the edge of the property. Mr. Franklin had worked for our family since I was a child. He was in his 70s now, semi-retired, but he still came by twice a week to keep the hedges honest, as he liked to joke. When I knocked on the screen door, he looked up from a crossword puzzle and blinked at me like he wasn't sure I was real. "Emily Hart," he said slowly. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought you'd sworn off this place for good." "Guess not," I said. He motioned for me to sit in the creaky chair across from him. "Your old man would have been glad to see you. He asked about you more than anyone knew." That hit harder than I expected. I cleared my throat. "Mr. Franklin, I found something. In the attic. A will. Not the one they read." His eyes narrowed. He didn't look surprised, just tired. "Dated June 11th, I added. "Equal split between me and Vanessa. Do you know anything about it?" He looked down at his crossword. "Not my business, really. But he told you things, didn't he?" I pressed. "Near the end." A long pause. Then he set the pencil down and sighed. "Couple weeks before he died, your father wasn't well. Not just in body, but in spirit. You could see it in the way he walked, in how quiet he got. Used to hum while trimming the roses. Stopped doing that. One day, I was raking near the back when I heard shouting from his study. I froze. "Shouting?" He nodded. "Vanessa." She was mad, red in the face, told him he was making a mistake, that she'd taken care of everything and deserved better. Your father didn't yell back. He just said real quiet, "I'm still here, Vanessa. You don't get to replace me before I'm gone." My breath hitched. "She stormed out," Mr. Franklin continued. "Didn't even look at me. Your dad came out 10 minutes later, sat on the porch and said, 'Franklin, if I pass before I get to make things right, promise me you'll remember I tried.'" I stared at the old man across from me. His hands were shaking slightly now. I thought he meant something else, he said softly. But now, I think he knew she was going to override him. Override him how? He gave a tired shrug. I'm just a gardener. I trim bushes, not legal documents. But I know the look of a man who's losing power in his own house. I swallowed hard. Thank you. Truly. He nodded and leaned back. You be careful, Emily. Your sister, she's not as composed as she looks. That night I went back to the letter again, this time searching for what he hadn't said. The gaps, the hesitation, the way every sentence felt like it had been rewritten 10 times in his head. Had he tried to protect me, quietly, or had he just run out of strength? Because the man who wrote those words, who scribbled desperate bullet points and warned she'll take it all, wasn't the same father I remembered from childhood. He was someone cornered, someone watching his legacy slip through his fingers. And if that's what happened, then Vanessa didn't just inherit everything, she stole it. Vanessa was laughing in the kitchen when I walked in. She stood by the sink, speaking softly into her phone, a wine glass in her other hand, smiling that perfect smile she wore like armor, the kind that never touched her eyes. It never had. She paused when she saw me, covered the receiver, and said, "Be right with you." I didn't answer. I just watched. She was still the image of control. Flawless hair, tailored blouse, every move calculated. But now that I was looking harder, I could see it. The slight tremor in her fingers as she set down the glass, the way she adjusted her necklace 3 times in a row. Nervous tells. She ended the call and turned to me with a bright, practiced grin. "Emily," she said lightly, "you look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I replied. "Found some things in the attic." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "Ah, that place is full of junk." "Not all junk," I said, meeting her gaze. "Some of it was handwritten." A pause, barely noticeable, but it was there. A microsecond of stiffness in her shoulders. I let the silence stretch between us. "I'm guessing you're referring to that old draft will," she finally said, casual again. "It was never filed, no witnesses. Dad changed his mind." "How do you know he changed his mind?" She blinked. "Because I was here." "So was he," I said. Her lips pressed into a flat line. "Look, I don't know what kind of narrative you're building in your head, but Dad wanted things to be simple. Streamlined. That's why he used Callahan." "Streamlined," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" She stepped closer, wine glass in hand. "If this is about money, Emily," "It's not." "Then what is it about? Approval? Attention?" And there it was. The old Vanessa, the one who weaponized sweetness, the one who always made me feel like wanting something, anything, made me selfish. "It's about the truth," I said evenly. Vanessa took a long sip of her wine. "Well," she said, tone cooling, "I'd be careful how you go digging for that. Truth has a way of getting ugly." She walked out before I could answer. Later that day, I found myself back in my father's old study. It had been converted since his death. The armchair replaced, shelves rearranged. But one thing was still the same, the filing cabinet by the window. The top drawer was locked. I dug through his desk for the key. After several minutes of rummaging through pens, sticky notes, and empty tins of breath mints, I found it, taped beneath the bottom drawer like a secret. The lock clicked open with a soft snap. Inside were folders, labeled in his handwriting: medical, insurance, bank statements, Vanessa, Emily. I pulled out the Vanessa file. Inside were documents I didn't expect: emails, printed spreadsheets, credit card statements, and handwritten notes in my father's looping script. Unauthorized withdrawal, check dates. Convinced me to sign power of attorney while on pain meds. Says it's for estate prep, not sure. Missing $48,000. Follow up. My stomach turned. I pulled out the Emily file. There were only a few pages. A printout of my college graduation photo, a handwritten list of all the birthdays I'd missed coming home for, all circled. A single sticky note attached to the last page, in his handwriting. I wasn't there the way I should have been, but I never stopped watching. She's stronger than they know. I pressed my fingers to the page, breath catching. He had been watching. Quietly. Silently. Always. And yet, he still left me out. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe someone else made sure I stayed erased. That night, I confronted my mother. She sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a Better Homes and Gardens magazine, as if the world wasn't collapsing. I dropped the manila envelope onto the table. She didn't look up. "What's this?" "The real will." She finally glanced at it, then back at me. "Don't be dramatic." He wrote it 6 weeks before he died, signed it, dated it. He even mentions me. "That doesn't make it legal, Emily." "No, but it makes it true." She set the magazine down and looked me full in the face for the first time since I arrived. "You always were the emotional one," she said coolly. "Always looking for signs of injustice when maybe, just maybe, it's you who's out of place." I swallowed hard. He didn't believe that. He never did. "He also didn't stop her," she said. That shattered me. Because it was true. He hadn't stopped Vanessa. Not fully. Not in time. I left the kitchen without another word. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Pale, tired, but not broken. Not yet. The copy of the will wasn't enough. I knew that. It wasn't notarized. It wasn't filed. It was written in ink, on paper aged by attic heat and time. In court, it would be called a draft. A suggestion. Maybe even a forgery, depending on who hired the better lawyer. But I knew my father's handwriting. I knew his tone, his guilt, the careful way he shaped his sentences, as if afraid someone might read too much into them, or not enough. And I knew one other thing for certain. If he had rewritten his will, he must have told someone about it, or left a backup. I went back to the attic. It was almost evening now, and the light filtering in through the slats was dusky orange. The air smelled like dry wood and insulation. My arms were already sore from crawling around the rafters the first time, but I didn't care. I needed more. I pulled out another box labeled 2017-2019 Taxes or Correspondence. Buried under folders of invoices and legal letters, I found an envelope addressed to someone I hadn't thought about in years. Robert Clark, my father's former attorney, the one he'd worked with for over a decade, before switching to Mr. Callahan a few years ago. Inside the envelope was a printed email exchange. My father's email header read, "Subject, revision help, urgent, date, June 12, 20XX. To R. Clark, law at..." "Robert, I'm attaching the handwritten version until we can meet. It's a rough copy, but my intentions are clear. I need it formalized ASAP. I'm dealing with some pushback on this from inside. You understand. I want this locked before July. Thanks for always having my back. DH." The attachment wasn't there, of course, just the printout. But this was proof. He'd sent the real will to someone. He wanted it official, and he knew he was up against resistance. I dropped the paper and sat back on my heels. The edges of everything were starting to blur. Time, memory, motive. It wasn't just about Vanessa anymore. It wasn't just about what she took. It was about what was stolen before I even knew to protect it. I found Robert Clark's number through an old listing and called him the next morning. He answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly and slow. "Clark speaking." "Mr. Clark, this is Emily Hart, David Hart's daughter." Silence, then, "Emily. My God, I haven't heard that name in a while. I found something, an email from my father. He sent you a copy of a will on June 12th, said he wanted to finalize it before July." Another pause. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, he did." My chest clenched. "Did you ever draft it?" I started to. We had a meeting scheduled for the 18th, but he cancelled, said things were complicated at home. After that, I didn't hear from him again. Did you tell anyone? I wasn't asked to. David didn't give me permission to share the draft. Then I heard he'd passed. By that time, the family had retained Mr. Callahan. I assumed they'd moved forward with the revision. They didn't. He went quiet. Emily, I don't want to make trouble. This isn't trouble. This is theft. I need your help. He exhaled through the phone, long and low. I still have the draft in my archives, he said. It's not official, but it shows intent. If you want it, I'll send it. But be careful. Your sister doesn't strike me as someone who likes loose ends. That evening, I received a PDF file in my inbox. Hart Revised Will Draft PDF. And it was identical to the handwritten version I'd found. I printed it, studied the signature, the phrasing, the final line. In the absence of clarity, let this document speak not just for legality, but for conscience. I stared at that sentence until the words bled. And then, slowly, I began building a folder, my own case file, the email, the will draft, the attic copy, my father's journal notes, the audio file I hadn't told anyone about yet, one I'd found tucked deep inside his phone backup. It was short, 22 seconds, just his voice, raspier than I remembered. If this is ever needed, I want to say it plainly. I tried to make it right for both of them, but I was tired, and I trusted someone I shouldn't have. I hope Emily understands. I hope she fights if she has to. I pressed play again and again. Each time it broke something deeper, but it also rebuilt something too. You're imagining things, Emily. That was the first thing Vanessa said when I brought her the email printout. She didn't even flinch, didn't even read it, just skimmed it like it was spam, set it down gently on the table, and sipped her coffee. I stared at her. It's an email from Dad to Robert Clark. He asked him to formalize the new will, the one that included me. And yet, she said calmly, Callahan is the one who finalized it. That's what the law recognizes. Because you brought him in. After Dad cancelled the meeting with Clark, Vanessa raised an eyebrow. He cancelled the meeting. My stomach twisted. She was flipping it. You can say it out loud, Vanessa, I snapped. You pressured him. You shut it down. She gave a thin smile. Or maybe Dad changed his mind. Again. Maybe he realized how impractical it would be to split things evenly between two daughters when one of them hadn't been around in years. I clenched my fists. That's not what he said. It's not what he wrote. Her tone dipped just slightly. And how do you plan to prove any of this? With attic scraps and a PDF file? I stepped closer. With Clark's statement, with Dad's voice memo, with the copy of the draft that matches his handwriting. You've always been dramatic, she said softly. You look for betrayal in every corner. Do you really think a few scribbles and a voicemail mean he didn't want me to have the estate? I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, he didn't want just you to have it. That's the difference. Vanessa tilted her head. You're spiraling, Em. You've been gone so long you forgot what the truth feels like. There it was, the gaslight. She said it like a lullaby, like she was the calm one and I was the storm. But it didn't work this time. Because I had the storm now. I was it. I left her in the kitchen, without another word. That night I confronted my mother. She was in the living room, folding laundry that no one had asked her to fold, wearing that old navy sweater she only brought out during mourning seasons. I sat down across from her, placing the manila envelope between us. She didn't look up. I know about the will. Dig? Circe? I assumed you'd dig until you did. You knew it existed. Her hands didn't stop folding. Your father talked to me about it. He was confused, ill. I told him not to make decisions when he was emotional. He was of sound mind. Her hands finally stilled. I suppose that depends on whose version of him you want to believe. I stared at her. Why are you protecting her? I'm protecting stability. Stability, I choked. You mean control? She met my gaze. Her eyes were colder than Vanessa's. Older, more practiced. You always had a flair for victimhood, Emily, even when you were 5 and thought your sister got more ice cream than you. Some things don't change. That landed like a slap. I was left out of my own father's legacy, I said quietly. She returned to folding. You left first. That night I couldn't sleep. Not with their voices echoing in my head. Not with the memory of my mother's knuckles smoothing fabric while she dismantled my reality. I pulled out the folder, laid out every document, photo, scrap of handwriting. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. And if no one else believed me, fine. But the truth was still the truth, and I'd take it into the light if it killed me. It started with one line, an overlooked sentence at the bottom of an email, hidden in a thread forwarded between Clark and my father. I had printed everything the night before and was reviewing it all again, this time with a red pen, like I used to do with essays in college. I was desperate to make sense of things, to find a pattern, to see what everyone else was refusing to admit, and there it was, a footnote. P.S. I'll drop a copy of the handwritten revision with Richard tomorrow, just in case anything delays formalizing. Richard, my father's old friend, a man I hadn't seen since the funeral. I sat frozen for a moment, then scrambled through my contacts. I didn't have his number, but I remembered where he worked. A small antique shop downtown, tucked between a florist and a bakery. I drove there before the sun had fully risen. The bell above the door jingled softly as I stepped in. Dust floated in beams of morning light. It smelled like cedar and old books. Richard looked up from behind the counter, adjusting his glasses. He blinked as if he couldn't believe it was me. "Emily," he said. "I need to ask you something," I said, breathless. "Did my father leave anything with you last summer? A letter, a file, anything?" His face changed. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the back room without a word. When he returned, he was holding a sealed manila envelope. Unmarked, unopened. "I didn't know what it was," he said. "Just that he asked me to hold on to it until someone came looking. He made me promise I wouldn't give it to anyone but you." I stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside was another will, identical to the one I'd found in the attic, but this one was notarized, signed by 2 witnesses, stamped, valid, undeniable. I couldn't breathe. He did finish it. He did try to do the right thing. And someone's, made sure it never saw the light of day. I sat on the hood of my car for a long time, the envelope in my lap, the truth burning in my throat. I thought of all the things my sister said. "You're imagining things. It's not about you." He changed his mind. "And of my mother. You left first." No, I didn't. They just never opened the door when I tried to come home. But this document, this truth, it was mine. Not just because it mentioned me, but because it finally gave me back what they'd tried to erase. My place, my name, my father's intent, and I knew what I had to do. I met with a probate attorney that same afternoon. Her name was Sylvia Marquez. Sharp eyes, direct voice, no nonsense. I laid the file on her desk. She flipped through it quickly, then sat back in her chair. "You're telling me this wasn't submitted during the estate proceedings?" "No. And your sister is the sole beneficiary under the submitted will?" "Yes. This changes everything." I swallowed. "How hard will it be to contest?" She folded her hands. "Hard. Messy. Expensive. You'll lose family, maybe friends. Your reputation may take a hit, depending on how loud your sister gets, but..." She tapped the notarized page. "You have a case." I stared at the paper again. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about recognition, about saying I was here. I mattered. He wanted me to have a piece of the world he built. I signed the retainer agreement. As my pen met the paper, I thought of my father's voice in that voicemail. "I hope she fights if she has to." I whispered it under my breath as the ink dried. "I will."